إن الذين يفترون على الله الكذب لا يفلحون. متاع قليل ولهم عذاب أليم.
صدق الله العظيم. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعهم إلى يوم الدين. You know, this is the last actually talk and of that series I have been giving about the basics of Islam. And we talked about the Aqidah, we talked about the Sharia, then we talked last week start talking about the Fiqh, and today, inshallah, I'm going to end the discussion on the Fiqh. But I just want to point something to you, that actually 50% of the Quran talk about Aqidah, which is the belief in Allah and the Day of Judgment. And that is to develop that personal relationship between you and Allah. About 5% to talk about what we call the Sharia, and from the Sharia is the Fiqh issues, you know, the laws and what you do, what you shouldn't do, and so on. So sometimes we focus on that part and we forget actually to develop that personal relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because that's the end of the day what will govern, you know, our success in the hereafter. But anyway, so last time, and I said when we talk about the Fiqh, you know, the scholar of the Fiqh or the jurist of the Fiqh, they have certain tools they use, and there is a foundational principle they have used. If you can understand these, you can understand what is the basis for why they are driving this religion, looking at the Quran and the Hadith, because the tools is the Quran and the Hadith, and then the other things, the 6 things that we discussed last time, which in addition to the Quran and the Hadith, the authentic Hadith, they talk about the consensus, the analogical reasoning, the general benefits, the action of people of Medina, the opinion of the Prophet's companion, and the juristic preference. And these are not all of the jurists use all of them, but some people use some and the other, or some use something and restricted in one area. Like, for example, some come say the consensus is not the consensus of all scholars, no, the consensus of the companion of the Prophet, for example. So these are things we discussed last time. Today, inshallah, what we are going to do, we are going to discuss now the foundational rules or the principles that they use for fiqh, you know, in this regard. This is, you can say this is the axiom, the principle, you know, you can use the term, but these are so important. And these are things that whatever rules they have, they want to look at these things. And for the first one, they said deeds are judged by intentions, okay? Al-umuru bil-maqasid. The second one, certainty is not removed by doubt. You know, and the third one, hardship requires dispensation. And obviously being living in the West, it seems like hardship requires dispensation is something that we actually take advantage from. And then fourth is customs are applied. And the fifth one is actions have consequences. And all these are, you know, short phrases they have developed, but they all based on the Quran or Hadith, the fundamentals of. So let's look at every one, you know, separately and see some of the application on it. The first one, deeds are judged based on intention, which is, al-umur al-maqasid. So in this case, you probably all know this hadith about that reported by Sayyidina Umar, reported in Bukhari and Muslim, which the Prophet ﷺ say, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that all action are bought by intention. And it continued the hadith that if you have done something, you did a task for the intention of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then your task for Allah. If you did this task of intention for something else, then the task for whatever intention you have. So all of you know this hadith. And then also from the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say, وَمَا أُمْرُوا إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مُخْلَصِينَ, that they have not been ordered but to worship Allah with sincerity. What it means that any action you do, there is an outward form of it, which is the action, what you did. There is an inward one, which is the sincerity. And the sincerity is the intention. Are you doing really this action sincerely for Allah or doing for something else? So that also comes in this regard. Now, here is the issues. The intention are very important because it differentiates between what we call devotional act and habitual act. So, and there is some devotional act that are only valid if the person declare his intention or her intention in advance. You have to declare the intention in advance before you engage in this act. Otherwise, this act has not been fulfilled. And the intention, declaration of intention, you don't say that, you don't have to say it with the tongue. You can say it with your, inside, with your heart in it. Now, what devotional act require intention and what devotional act do not require intention to be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? If you do not understand the purpose of the devotional act, or if that act has similar to other acts that are not devotional, and in this case, or has its implementation has uniqueness in it, then in that case, you have to have the intention in advance. If you understand the objective of the act, then in that case, and rationalize why are you doing it, then the intention is not required for being accepted. Obviously, the preferred to always have the intention list. So now we come to several things. If in the prayer, you pray, do you need to have the intention before you start or not? Or you just say Allahu Akbar and go? You have to have an intention for a reason that their prayer could be an obligatory prayer or could be an optional prayer. Plus, we also don't know why we pray the Zuhr 4 rak'ah and the Maghrib 3 rak'ah and the Fajr. We don't understand this. Why we go through that motion, to do it. Because a person can go through this motion by, bowing and prostrating as an exercise too. So since we really have there is many things ambiguous about why and the specific purpose, we can understand it's connecting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it could be confusing between other things. Therefore, the intention has to be done in advance before you do the prayer. If you just come to the prayer and just to get Allahu Akbar and when to have no intention that this is the prayer for whatever it is a sunnah or it is a zuhr or a maghrib or something, then in that case, the prayer is not counted. You have to repeat it. Now, there is difference now in the jurists, why some jurists insist on something and they say the intention have to be done before it and other they say not. Because it depends on if they rationalize the purpose of the intention, then in that case, they said, okay, the intention is not required for the fulfillment of it. For example, the wudu. Somebody say, yeah, we know the wudu. The purpose of the wudu is that, to cleanliness before we do the prayer. And in that case, for that scholar who said, I understand that the purpose, the jurist, that the purpose of the wudu is for cleanliness. If somebody push you in a swimming pool and you come out, you are in a state of wudu. Because although you didn't go to the swimming pool or the intention, you just came out and said, oh, you came already cleaned, assuming that swimming pool is clean, obviously. So, but the other will say no. you have to have, if you are going to have, that doesn't count as a wudu. You have to have the intention that you did it for a wudu. It comes to the other part, it comes in for paying the zakah. You know, would you have to declare that this is my intention, that this money I'm paying now, it is for zakah, or just to pay it? Like you come to every time in the masjid and you put, $20, or somebody needs something, you give him money. Do you have in your mind that this is really a zakah, or it's just a charity? And here is the difference also comes in. They come and say, because those who say we know the zakah for the benefit of communities, the benefit of this and so on, therefore it doesn't matter, you don't have to have intention. All what you do, you calculate your amount, and any opportunity you do it, you give the money for it, and that's sufficient. And the others say, no, but look, not every item you have has a zakah on it. We don't understand why this is 2%, why this is 5%, what is this 10%, why this is 20%, and therefore, therefore you have to have the intention in advance. It comes in if you are forced to pay the zakah. If you live in a country and you don't want to pay the zakah, and then whatever the system in the government to come insist you have to take the zakah, and take the zakah force from you, from your bank account as a zakah. Would that mean that you already paid the zakah and you have not, Allah subhanahu will account it for you as zakah or not? It depends what, school of fiqh you follow. If the school of fiqh you said you have to have the intention, then in that case you haven't paid it, and you will be responsible in front of Allah subhanahu for it. If the school of fiqh said no, you don't have, even if you're forced to pay it, you already fulfilled the obligation. So the intention becoming a little bit critical in what school of fiqh you are going, to use, and you have to do it, as I said, in advance of doing that. And the best way, frankly, to avoid the whole problem, and this is what this school of fiqh said, you have to, this act I understand it, and therefore I don't have to have the intention in advance, or this act I don't understand it, and then I have to have the intention in advance. I think we should train ourselves to declare intention for everything, because that is how you commit doing something for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you do it as a habit, not necessarily for what you consider this obligation. But everything you do, actually, it can be for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You go to work for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You exercise for the sake of Allah. You cook for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You help your friends for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Declare that I'm doing this for Allah's sake. And that directly become a habit. And then you will always have this intention in your mind for whatever act you're doing. And it helps you with something, because if I declare I'm going to work for the sake of Allah, assuming I have a business, and I'm saying I'm going to work for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because I want to bring the money so I can feed the family, I can support the community and so on, which, it is all legitimate acts and something responsibility that Allah make it obligatory upon us. If you do this, then obviously you cannot do anything, against Allah's command during that time when you are intentional. So you wouldn't cheat, you wouldn't lie, you wouldn't deceive anybody, because you declared, oh, I'm doing this business for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that also train you to discipline yourself and always put a test in yourself. Now it comes sometime to business transaction. It comes also in business transactions. And it comes, it said, okay, when I have a business transaction with you, there is an outward and there is an inward. There is an outward that you agree and I agree to the deal. And there is inward that, that my intention, And so it comes in a little bit tricky is if somebody forces you to enter into a business deal. Which one govern? And you said yes. And you feel uncomfortable getting, but you just force it to do it. Which one is the intention is the govern, or the outward, your agreement would govern? And the scholars differ. Imam Malik and Imam Ahmad say they give more weight the intention. That no, you can say agree because you force it to do it, but your intention not to do it, therefore that contract is not valid. And The other Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Shafi'i said, no, you said yes, then you committed. The contract is valid. Actually, if you look for the history, Imam Malik was punished for this insistent on this. And he was punished and beaten up in Medina because he insisted that no, you can enter into agreement. If you enter into by force, is not valid. And where did it happen? In the bay'ah, when they giving, the Khalifa wants the people to commit to him and give allegiance to him by force. So people would say, okay, to avoid punishment, and they said, yeah, we give allegiance to the Khalifa. And Imam Malik said, no, their allegiance, if you that's not, you are not sincerely or intentionally did not want to do it, then you are not committed to it. And that's why he was punished and beaten up in Medina for this, for just that simple rule that we are discussing. The second fundamental rule, foundational rule, is certainty is not removed by doubt. And this is obviously, in the Hadith and the Quran. In the Quran, for Surah Yunus, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا يَتَّبِعُ أَكْثَرُهُم إِلَّا ظَنًّا إِنَّ الظَّنَّ لَا يُغْنِي عَنِ الْحَقِّ شَيْءٍ. That they, most of them follow doubts, but truly doubts cannot avail against the truth. So, and the Prophet ﷺ also know all of the Hadith. When somebody told him about if I'm praying, and I don't remember if I prayed 2 or 3, what would I do? And the Prophet ﷺ told him just to base it on the number you are certain of. Okay, if you 2 or 3, then assuming you finish 2 and continue, if you're praying the Maghrib repeat has another rak'ah if you're praying. And by the way, that happened also. If you come, for example, for a rak'ah and you did the sujood and so on, and I said, well, I don't remember if I read the Fatiha in the first rak'ah or not. That's a doubt now. In that case, you repeat this rak'ah, in it. What happened if you are in a case of ruku' and you say, I don't remember I read the Fatiha or not? When you get up again and read the Fatiha and continue to ruku' again and so on. So that becomes very helpful because frankly, I don't know about you, but often enough you pray and you always forget about, what you have done. So if you ever done, then you do it this way. So we apply this, as I said, in all our daily life. But now there is actually subtle differences between the Imma regarding something. How about the wudu? You did the wudu in the morning, but you don't know if you broke it or not. Would I need to do wudu again or build on the certainty? Certainly I do the wudu. The uncertain, the doubt that whether I broke it or not. That's when the scholar differ also, Imam Malik considered the wudu as a prerequisite. Therefore, you have to build on certainty. That means you have to do it. If you have any doubt, you do the wudu again. And there is other, Imam said, no, if you did a wudu, you have done a wudu, but you are doubt, then in that case, you didn't break it, just to build on the certainty. Then they also come and differ in some. How about a person who is compulsive doubter? Like you pray, did I pray 1 or 2? Then you come read the 2, then did I pray really 2 or 3? You start doubting all the time. Then here is what can you do? Are you going to play 20 rak'ahs now? So they come and they differ. They come and say, Imam Abu Hanifa, for example, he say, build on the certainty for the first time you doubt, and then after that build in the doubt. So if the first time you said that I pray 2 or 1, you assume it is 1. If you come to the third one that I say 2 or 3, no, assume you pray 3. So that's some others they say no, continue building it down. So now you can decide which one you like, because this is now becoming an opinion for them. The principle is valid. The question is in the application. So if you are a compulsive doubter, I think Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Abu Hanifa opinion is better. Actually, it's easier than Imam Malik, because Imam Malik said no, you have to always build in the certainties, and then Imam Abu Hanifa said build only in once, uncertainty for the first time, and then after that, build. Don't worry about it. Basically, is an interesting. Actually, this becoming also an important if you are in a business dealing. So I'll give example here because we have a rule in the Quran, in the business, that al-bayyinatu ala man idda'a. Al-bayyinatu ala man idda'a. That who make a claim, he has to prove it. Okay? The question sometime, if you go to court, who responsible for coming with the proof? So if somebody A loaned the money to B, and then B said, I paid it to you, I returned the loan to you, but A said, no, you haven't returned the money to me. And A took the person B to the court. Whom you are going to assign to come with the proof? The person who said, I paid it, or the person who said, I loaned, who's suing? That depends. If the judge asked the person who borrowed the money, and he said, do you owe this person anything? And he said, no. In that case, the one, he has to prove that he loaned you the money. On the other hand, if you say, he loaned me some money, but I paid it to him, who's going now to come with the proof? The one who borrowed the money. Why? Because, okay, you admitted that you loaned the money. Now, the doubt becoming in, did you pay it or not? Since the money is supposed to be in your pocket, you own it, then you better come with proof that you paid it. But if you said, I don't owe him anything, then the other guy has to come with the proof that he loaned you the money. And they have the record. And this is why in Islam, you always in business, financial transaction, you better write it down. If you loan somebody, he ought to write it down. When he returns you the money, you better write it down to avoid this argument. But this principle applies in this. That's why when it comes to application of the hudud, the legal punishment by Allah decrees, the doubts is big deal. That's why it's very hard to apply the hudud, the punishment, because the doubt always is the guy who's committed is, I didn't do it. Then in that case, there is doubt. You cannot apply the had if there is doubt. Even if the guy has the money, that he stole the money in his hand, and he got caught with it. And he said, well, I didn't do it. The money, his money was putting it on the table here, and I took it. And the guy said, the money was in my pocket. Now there is a doubt. Then what is the judge will do now? He cannot apply the had. So it's becoming a very interesting that certainty, is not removed by doubt. It has so many applications in this regard. And this is why they actually have different forms of it, because it has also other application from our daily life. The foundational condition of a human being is freedom. A person is innocent until he incriminates himself. The basis of a speech is the truth. So if I tell you something, you have to accept that I'm telling the truth. And the penal code require absolute certainty, that things remain as they are in the past, unless there is a proof that they have been changed. Purity is the foundational state of everything. So all of these are related to certainty, is not removed by doubts. And that is why and it comes in, for example, to some subtle rules, like dogs, for example. Imam Malik said, the dogs is halal, it's pure, because everything is pure unless it's proven unpure, in this regard. Other Imam, they say, yes. But, since I know people sometimes talk about the dogs anyway, but everybody say, if, they don't want to say it is, having a dog as a pet is really prohibited, but they said it is just disliked, But obviously some people, they said it's prohibited in the house and so on, but you know all of these things here. It also related actually to substances, which we have. If you get something that's supposed to be haram, and then transformed, either chemically, or physically, as there is a transformation on it, does it become a new, there is a change now. Is that a change, you make it halal or haram? Or remained as haram because of the origin? And if the change, actually, the major essence of change, then it becoming, halal, even if originally it was haram. But obviously, sometimes you feel uncomfortable doing. Actually, when I talked to my son yesterday, he gave me an example. I said, how about if you go in and they're cooking sometime the food, like seafood or something, and they cook it with wine. Is it halal or haram? Can you eat it or don't eat it? Now, obviously, you can feel uncomfortable, but you can, if you apply the rule, you come and say, well, but it already, if it's this, and as soon as they burn it, the alcohol is gone. Then it should transform it. Then it's no longer halal. So I'll leave that to you to decide which way you do. But this rule is becoming very important because it has so many applications that, that you can face it in your daily life. The other rule, which is hardship require dispensation. And by the way, when I talk about these rules, because there is a lot of subtlety on them, remember that if you go to somebody, he tell you it's haram. It's easier to make haram. It is difficult to think, to make, to analyze things and say, well, I shouldn't. Because remember, the basic of this religion is to make things easy, not to make it difficult by everything. This is haram, haram, haram. Haram, make it to yourself. That's fine, But really, frankly, just have to be careful. And I'm telling you all of these rules because, people sometimes ask you, and you better say, I don't know. Rather, if you're tempted to say haram, and this is, by the way, that's what Imam Malik, they said that people always quote about him that he was given 100 questions and he only answered 15. And for the others say, I don't know. Not that he doesn't have an opinion. He say he didn't know because he has no proof to say it is haram. No clear proof to say it's haram. And therefore he said, I don't know, and left it, in that regard. So because they were very conscientious that they would not say something haram prohibited unless it's absolutely clear in this regard. So hardship require dispensation. Obviously, it's the Quran and the Hadith is full of this one, that this religion is a religion of ease. Allah subhanahu yuridu Allahu bikum al-yusra wa la yuridu bikum al-usra. Allah wants things to be easier for you and does not want things to be hard for you. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, inna khayra ad-din aysaru, and he repeated this 3 times. The best of the religion is the easiest, is the simplest one. He said, إنما بعثتم ميسرون ولم تبعثوا ولم تبعثوا معسرون, that you have been sent to make things easy. You have not been sent to make things, difficult. And then the Prophet ﷺ also says, Allah did not send me to be harsh or make things difficult. Allah sent me to teach and make things easy for people. And when the Prophet ﷺ sent his companions to Abu Musa al-Ash'ari and Mu'adh ibn Jabal to Yemen, he told them, he said, make things easy and do not make it difficult. To give people glad tidings and don't alienate the people. Don't make them upset. Don't always be threatening to them about what is going to happen to them if they do this and this. And you all know this, it is when somebody came to complain to the Prophet ﷺ about Mu'adh that when he prays, like the Fajr prayer, the Subh prayer, he is very long. And the Prophet, instead of and this is sometime, when sometime you get, I think our Imam today is very good actually. He read, and Imam Muhammad also very good. They read shorter, verses, but some people would come and you'll be, people were standing and all like me, their knees hurting and he's reading 40 verses or something. And don't recognize that the Prophet ﷺ, when the man came to his Mu'adh, the Prophet ﷺ to Mu'adh, أَفَتَّانٌ أَنْتَ يَا Mu'adh. He reprimanded Mu'adh. He said, how can you do this? If you are going to pray with Surah Al-Shams or Surah Al-Falaq, this simple, surahs for the who when they are there, because there is people are weak, there is people have business needs and so on. And this is why he said, you are a Fattan. Fattan means, are you want to cause uprising? Are you going to have a revolt here? Mu'adh. So the Prophet ﷺ, was always keen to make things easy for people. And you all know this, that he always, if he was given a choice between 2 things, he always picked the easy one. This principle also has different, they use it also expressed in a different way. which hardship require dispensation? They said necessities allow the prohibited. Okay. Something very necessary require the prohibited. Or harm should be removed, you know. And then the other one, when the matter is constricted, it require expansion, you know. So, and so here it comes, and this is now become so important to you. Scholars have came and divided the prohibitions into two kinds. That when you said haram, you know, it's two kinds. They said prohibition of aims and the prohibition of means. A prohibition of aim is the one that based on a clear text and prohibited for in itself. The prohibition of means is the prohibition that based on a general text, but it is not prohibited in itself, but because it can lead to a prohibition of aims. Okay, you have, well, that's, this point is very clear, because, you know, and I'll come to example, and I guarantee you, one of these examples you all fall into it, apply. Therefore, you have to understand where is the prohibition, a prohibition of aim or prohibition of means. And where is they came with that distinction between the two? Because the Prophet ﷺ came to the companion and said, you know, don't never sit in the road. You know. And the people said, you know, Prophet ﷺ, you know, we have some business dealing that we do while we are sitting in the road. We met each other and we're sitting here, you know, in the road. And the Prophet ﷺ said, well, in that case, if you have to have this meeting in the road, then in that case, better give the road its right. And they asked, well, what is the right of the road? And he said, you lower your gaze, avoid harming other, return the greeting of peace, enjoying the good and forbid the evil. So scholars said, here is the Prophet ﷺ make the command, don't sit in the road. But it wasn't because a prohibition in itself, but because you could cause harm to other people. So by sitting in the road, you can cause harm to other people. So as long as you are not going to cause, so that is the prohibition now for this, don't sit in the road, was not a prohibition in itself, but a prohibition of means because it can lead to something else. So in this regard, the Prophet, I said, okay, if you are not going to cause the harm, then okay, you know. So that's how the differentiation between them. And here, so the scholar also came in and said, okay, now when we look to prohibitions, hardship. They said, okay, there is three types of hardships. There is a large hardship, there is a medium hardship, and there is a small hardship. You know, because you remember the principle is that, you know, hardship requires dispensation. So what type of hardship you have? So what is a large hardship? The large hardship is a hardship that is essential need for your survival. You know, and then the example, and therefore for this hardship, even the things is prohibited for in itself. A prohibition of aim, you can violate it. An example, you are being choked, you're eating and you have a choke. And then the only thing you have is a, you know, alcohol or a beer or something in front, no water. Then you can drink it. Although the alcohol is prohibited by itself, okay? Then they come in the medium hardship. They said a medium hardship that related to normal needs, and in general that normal needs are related to business, but not necessarily limited to business, but in general is business. And in this case, if you have this, if you have a business need, which, you know, certain things that prohibited, that, you know, but you have a business need, you can violate it, but you violate what? You violate the prohibition that based of means, not aims. Okay. So let me give an example. The alcohol prohibited. We cannot drink alcohol as Muslim or khamr. Okay. But also what's prohibited is sitting on a place when they serve in the khamr. Now, is sitting in a place, prohibition of sitting in a place for serving khamr is a prohibition for itself, or because it could lead you to a prohibition of in itself, which is drinking khamr? The objective here is like the road. It's not prohibited in itself, but it's prohibited because it can lead to the other one. Then in that case, if you know you are not going to, if that would sitting was something which has khamr in it, it would not lead you to do the other, and you have business needs, then in that case you can violate that rule and sit. Now, why this is so important for all of us? You go to any hotel today, they have a refrigerator, and the refrigerator has, a khamr. You are in a business meeting with people, everybody's staying in, Radisson or Hilton or whatever, one of these big hotels, and the refrigerator in the room has khamr in it, alcohol in it. What are you going to do? You cannot go to the hotel and tell them, please remove the refrigerator. Or you can say, I'm not going to stay in that one, I'm going to stay in a Motel 6, Okay, so now you come in for a business meeting, and at the end they're going dinner together. Are you going to leave? Because obviously they will drink. Then what do you do? Now, what is, in this case, this law can apply. That because the prohibition in itself was not this prohibition of sitting was intended to prevent you from drinking, then in that case you can violate it in this regard. So it is not an aim prohibition, but it's an aim at a means of prohibition. So I don't want to confuse you, but just to think about it, because you want to do in this case. I'll tell you, some scholars actually do something that sometimes they allow it to happen. For example, if you sell something, as a Muslim, you should tell the buyer every defect in that product, or everything that will happen. You buy medicine, they will tell you, okay, the side effect is this and this and this and this and this, or anything, the product. They come and said, if you start spilling to everybody what is negative aspect of it, nobody will buy anything, and the business will stop. Therefore, they come and say, no, you can write it down, make it like a fine print. Put it down, but you don't have to say it to him. Let him, if he wants to read it, he can read it in his own. And they took it from this prohibition because he said that's a means issues. You are not trying to deceive, but if you are going to prevent, harm for the business, if you ever spill everything, because everything has a negative side in. And then they come the other prohibition, which is the, small prohibition, inconveniences. Like, for example, men do not wear silk, or, wear gold, or, well, I cannot wake up in the morning and do wudu because the water is a little bit cold. That's inconvenience. That's nothing, prevented, no hardship here. But obviously, if you get sick, that's a different issue. Now we're talking about different parts. So the other rule, which customs are applied. Now, custom applied, that becomes also an interesting, and also where it comes from the Quran and also the Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. For example, in Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talk about when a woman is get divorced. Before, if you married and you got divorced, before you actually have any sexual relationship with her, And then what do you do? And you're giving the dower to her. What do you do? And would she have a mut'ah? Did you give her something, money too, and so on? Then the verse here in Surah Al-Baqarah says, and give them a gift of the customary amount, mata'an bil ma'ruf. If you are rich, you give certain amount, bil ma'ruf, whatever the custom. And if you are poor, you give according to the customs, to that woman that you are going to divorce her without you sleeping with her. So she doesn't have all of the rights like the one whom you have already sexual relation with her, but still you can give her something. So they said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't spill what is this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala customary. So customary depends on the place you are in, depends on the families, depends on the, and so on. So everybody, the society is different, the people are different. And then they also come and say, when the Prophet ﷺ sometimes was returning, people from Africa started celebrating his coming by dancing with spears in the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ. And Sayyidina Umar was always good in trying to prevent things. He wants to prevent him from doing it. And the Prophet ﷺ told him, no, leave them. This is the way, this is the people, Bani Arfida, which is a tribe, and that is their way, their custom to do this. If they celebrate something, and then they do it. So the Prophet, and the hadith, this account, because said Aisha wants to watch them, and she allowed them, and the Prophet ﷺ told her, do you still want to watch? And she said, and she's tired, so he carried her so she can watch from their room to looking at this. So there is, and then there is another account also, when Hind bint Utbah, when the Prophet ﷺ went to victorious in Mecca, and then she became a Muslim over her husband Abu Sufyan, she told the Prophet ﷺ that Abu Sufyan is a man who is very tight with money, and he doesn't give me enough money to spend for myself and my kids. So can I take money from him without his knowledge? And the Prophet ﷺ told her, take it according to the customs. So I mean, you are from a wealthy family, you take whatever a wealthy family take. If you are coming a wife from a poor family, obviously, she take a little bit. So he didn't bill to her, he didn't specify to her what's the amount. So scholar took these and says, in that case, that's what customs can be applied. And also how people now start actually using this law, and maybe this case now it become a combination between customs are applied and hardship, required dispensation. Because as part of the business deal, you cannot sell something unless you have, access to it, you have hold it. Like I cannot sell you this cup unless I have it in my hand. But can now you sell things when you never have access, you never held it in your hand? A lot of time people, buy things from China, and the ship or the tanker is coming, and somebody says, I'll buy whatever in the tanker, and he can sell him whatever in the tanker without even he receiving it. And the scholar said, well, in that case, this now become a customary practice, and therefore that is, allowed. Although the original rule that, you have to have hand access to it. So, but if you are going to apply customs, then there must be meet four conditions. Custom cannot violate a textual ruling in the Quran or Hadith. That's obvious. The custom must be broadly recognized and followed by them, that everybody know it. Don't come and tell me, well, the custom of my family is this. No, the custom of your family doesn't count. It is a societal custom that counts. And the custom must be stable and not ambiguous. And then, it's an interesting, this is a very interesting one, actually. In the United States, if you're buying something, important, I said, how much is this cup? And say, $3. That is, I'm talking about $3. I'm not talking about €3. I'm not talking about 3 cents, because you assess the value. But if you are, for example, in the airport, what is the currency? Nobody knows the currency. So when somebody tell you the price, he better spell out, the price in the sense that it has to be, it's a euro currency, dollars, whatever it is, yen and whatever. If you ever in Egypt and want to buy an expensive things like a car, and you tell a guy, how much is this car? And he tell you 1 rabbit. That's exactly what I'm saying. It's 1 rabbit. Then, okay, I'll take the car and go buy a rabbit and wants to give him a physical rabbit. No, the rabbit in Egypt is 1 million Egyptian pound. So you better, in that case, be very careful. If somebody tell you 1 rabbit and you go in there, don't assume. And, they have different names for different, animals that depends on the amount, 10 million, pound, how much, and so on. So this has to be recognized. It has to be as stable as it, not ambiguous. And the custom has to be precedent and not recent. Where is this comes in? Comes in in the case of, say, a woman, her husband died and he didn't pay the delayed dower, and there is nothing written, then she can go to the judge, who will have to pay it, first for her, because that's considered as a debt. The dower is a debt. The delayed dower is a debt on the man. Then she said, oh, my daughter was married, and her dower was $10,000. The delayed dower was $10,000. I need, then my share would be 10,000. He said, no, but when you were married 50 years ago, the dower was only $100. The delayed dower $100. Then you only he owes you $100. So here is what the customs, sometimes comes to play, even in a legal setting in this regard. So the other things that the rules, which is, I think that's the final rule I have, is that actions have consequences. Now, this has become actually important for how we behave, because sometimes we say, oh, this is a sunnah of a prophet, I have to do it this way. But look at the consequences of what you are doing. You are living in a different society, has a different customs. If you start applying what has been the customary things that was done in Arabia 1400 years ago, you might repel people from, even considering, how to think about Islam. And where they came to this rule from, they said, look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah Al-An'am, لا تسبوا الذين يدعون من دون الله فيسبوا الله عدوا بغير علم. That don't insult the idol, whatever those people worship, otherwise they might insult Allah. So don't curse what other people worship, because the other guy would curse Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you did something, but the consequences was negative. So don't do it in this regard. And there is the Prophet ﷺ did so many things in it. When, there is always, when the Prophet ﷺ went to Medina, there were always a hypocrites. And one of the guy who is a major hypocrite, Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul, always trying to create havoc among the division among the Muslims. And he did something, and you all know the story. He did, insulted the Prophet ﷺ and so on. And Umar said, oh, Prophet Allah, make me kill him. And the Prophet ﷺ told him, do you want the people to say Muhammad killed his companions? So although it was legitimate, because the guy really was causing major problem to the Muslim, but the Prophet ﷺ didn't punish him. Why? Because the consequences of it. The other one is when the Prophet ﷺ went to Mecca victorious, and he told the Aisha, the Kaaba, when the Arabs was burned, and then when they built it, they didn't have enough money and enough wood, so they built it smaller than the foundation of Ibrahim. So the Prophet ﷺ was telling Aisha, if it wasn't your people just new in Islam, I would have demolished it and built it in the foundation of Ibrahim. So, but he didn't want to do it because people will go, oh, now we're destroying, the Kaaba that our parent and grandparent, has been worshipping around it. So he did not do it this way. The other case, obviously, that we also know is when the Prophet ﷺ came to do basically the Taraweeh during Ramadan in the first 2 days, and suddenly people heard that he prays, this rak'at, this prayer, then people used to come. The third day, he didn't show up. He didn't come out from his house. And in the morning, he told them, I didn't come out because I was afraid that if I came out, then in that case, it might have been obligatory in you, and that's hardship for you. So that's why I didn't want you to do it all the time in a group prayer like this. And this is actually interesting because of this. Imam Malik comes and says he does not make it disliked that you fast, the 6 days of Shawwal immediately after Ramadan, after the Eid. He said, because after a while, people might think this is becoming obligatory also as part of Ramadan. So his preference that you delay it a day or two, But obviously, as long as people do not know it, it's fine, And I said this is important, frankly, because the way you dress, the way you speak, the way you like people sometimes say, oh, Prophet ﷺ it was his hand, and then we sit with people, oh, say it was my hand. Well, the custom doesn't people eat by hand. And there's the consequences. People can look to it and become repulsive. If you're sitting with Muslim and that's what they do, it's fine. But, don't go in a restaurant when everybody's watching you and you dress like a Muslim and wife is dressed, like a Muslim, and then you start eating with your hand. So, I mean, you have to really think about the consequences of what you do. And that is something that this requires some intelligence, in this regard. So think always about the other part about it, and this is a trouble sometimes, not every, deviation of equal, basically rating. That is really very critical for us, because sometimes you insist, you get so upset about something, and you would not care about the most important, the one which is far more important. So we really need at some point to develop, like, a list of the priorities, like I have this, a person whose daughter did something wrong. Then I asked him, I said, did she pray? And he said, no. Well, why are you concerned about this one and you haven't been concerned about this one? So look at the priorities. If a girl, for example, does not want to wear hijab, okay, or if you try to push her to force it, it might make her leave the religion completely. If this is a wise action? No. If she prays, that's a higher priority. What is wearing the hijab comes in that list? It's number 2 or number 10 or number 15. So you have to watch, particularly with the kids, what are you enforcing? Because you upset them, frankly, and deviate, in this regard. So you have to be careful in selecting, and that rules become, but you have to also have clarity. What is a big deviation? What is a lower deviation? What's a lower deviation? When you decide, make your battles, for the real ones. But the person, kids who do never pray, and you don't encourage them to pray, and you don't, help them to pray. And now when they do something, you don't, suddenly become so upset. You should be upset about this one first, And anyway, so, and as part of this action, by consequences comes another ruling, and this is what related to what I was just telling you. Removal of harm, it takes priority over bringing the benefits, And then there should be no harm for yourself or others. So these are all related to the consequences of things. So as a closure for this one, so I did, this is the last one I'm going to speak about this topic. So I did discuss about the Aqidah. I discussed about, first of all, the sources for everything that we will consider religious, which is the Quran and the Hadith. And we'll talk about the Quran, obviously. But the Quran, obviously, it's 100% accurate, no Muslim doubt on it. But the Hadith is so many of them. Then we'll talk about the Hadith, the Aziz Hadith, and the Mutawatir Hadith. And I give you a reference for a book that has a Mutawatir Hadith and has 120 Hadith. And actually, that book, you can buy it for $3 or something. And in English too, English translation for it. I think it's a good book to have. And most of the hadith mutawatir are actually related to actions, not related to statements. And then we talked also, I started talking about the fiqh. We talked about the tools of fiqh, and just now we finished, the foundational, rules that the jurists derive for in fiqh. And obviously we said all of this based in the Quran and the hadith. So why with this? Why are you wasting time for the last 3 times, whatever, 2 weeks and this week too? I think my motive actually with this, I think you have to appreciate the objective, the fundamentals actually, and the key goals of the Islamic Sharia is protecting the human rights, promoting mercy, bringing facilitation, and removing hardship. In the same time, you also appreciate and realize why there is differences among the scholars, when looking at the same opinion. And also make it tolerant to some of the different opinions, because everyone has a basis for it, and the basis you understand it. And why they, to say, okay, this is dislike, someone said this is haram, somebody said this is allowed. Why are they looking at the same thing? So now you appreciate, but you make the decision which one opinion you like, you basically convince it with that it has a much logical basis for it. The second one is also to know how, when you ask somebody a question, how you frame the question to him also, and when you get the answer, how you assess the basis for the answer. And if you ask somebody an opinion, and you have to ask him what is the basis for it, if you really are serious, because a lot of people want to say, oh, is it halal or haram? Well, you better understand and make your own decisions in this regard. Because, and as the Prophet ﷺ, if you make an effort to address an issue and you reach the wrong conclusion, Allah will give you one reward. If you reach the right conclusion, you get two rewards. So always ask for the basis and make your own decision at the end. At least you get the one reward, even if it is wrong. And Allah will never punish you for it in this regard. The other one also, which I want to make you aware, because a lot of time you ask, a person who memorizes the Quran suddenly become a faqih and a jurist, and you ask him a question. No. You have to appreciate that the type of jurist who can give an opinion or what we consider fiqh scholars are of three types. One of them, which is a creative faqih or creative jurist. And this is the one who have not only have the knowledge, but have the high IQ that be able to analyze the Quran, the Hadith, or take account this principle, look at the condition of the society, and derive the rule that fits. Not everyone has this intellectual, and I wish, frankly, even people who go to school of Medina or Azhar that become supposed to take a PhD, they should have an IQ test for them. Not because you can memorize things and repeat it, have a good memory, because my phone has a good memory too. But does it have the level of intelligence? Because this relation requires some intelligence in it. And the second type, watch an integrator jurist. An integrator jurist is, okay, I'm not going to give you my opinion, but I know what Imam Abu Hanifa said, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi'i, Imam al-Awza'i, these things, I know what is their opinion. And under your condition, under these circumstances, Imam Malik will be the best opinion for you. Or Imam Abu Hanifa will be the best. Or even Imam al-Awza'i, some other. In this regard. So you have this type of people, that's even good people to have. And the other one, which is probably the follower jurist, which is the most restrictive, because what happened, he only studied Imam Abu Hanifa. And everything you come to him is whatever Imam Abu Hanifa says. In general, that's the most restrictive because it cannot account for the circumstances that you have. To make the right decision for you. So I'll finish with this one. There is actually a good reference that you can access. And this is European Council for Fatwa and Research. And this is a very interesting because this is from the West. They have about, several fuqaha, from all over the world. And people ask them questions like, it just surprised me. I'm just giving you a warning here. I looked at that site before, and there is an English, site for it. But when I searched it this time before I put the reference, I only found the Arabic one. You can see this one here in your right here. Now, there is obviously books of fiqh, that available. I bought a book here, a set of books of fiqh here that by a scholar from, Syria. And it's about 10 volumes. I have them. But there is 2 of them has been translated, and these related to finance. And look at this, the one here, financial transactions, I cannot read it from my name. Financial transaction in Islamic jurisprudence, and translated by 2. There's 2 volumes in the bottom here. And these are exactly the same from the 2 volumes from this book. Now, who translated them is Dr. Jamal from Rice University. He studied finance. It's an English translation for them. So that tell you, can you imagine just for the finance itself has 2 volumes that you can look at if you are serious, to do that. But that's why when it comes to a specific issue, do a little bit effort on it to basically decide that this is something, I like to study a little bit on my own. And if you have an issue and you want to, I'll be glad to loan you, either the English or the Arabic volume. But there is other books. There is another book. But in this book, that book by Zuhaili, it actually has both every opinion, all of the different fuqaha, in this regard. So With this one here, that's it.
So this is also in English.
Which one?
This site is also
Is in English? Yeah, and the question and the answer in English?
right.
Well, that's great, actually, because I couldn't find. I'm glad you can. Okay, so it's in English. And the Brinkley, it has most of the question you have, that people come in, like, should we congratulate, the people non-Muslim in the Christmas time and so on. They address all of these issues, So anyway, I thought obviously I need to stop talking about this fiqh issue because sometimes it gets dry and you go to another subject, but maybe once in a while I can look to other, issues related to either aqidah and related, probably some element of fiqh. Like, for example, I thought, there is, when we talked about aqidah, we said, that there is 6 parts which Allah specified, but people sometimes add so many of them. So we can probably discuss about some, and this is particularly related to the day of judgment, because you can sometimes somebody says, oh, if you do not believe that Jesus will return, then you are a kafir. If you don't believe that the Dajjal will come, you're a kafir. Wait a minute, a kafir means, it's aqidah issues, So better have to be very concise, unambiguous, very clear, so we can discuss some of these issues. Other issues that people sometimes talk about might be of interest, that entertainment in Islam. Can you listen to music? Can you play cards? Can you play chess? And so on. What is, some element of it. Also the fate and predestination, and then hudud, the hudud, when it's applied, when it is not. And I said congratulating a non-Muslim in their celebration, but this is, you can get it from that fiqh. And inshallah, we go to a different, topics. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه. اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافنا فيمن عافيت وتولنا فيمن توليت وبارك اللهم لنا فيما أعطيت وقنا واصرف عنا شر ما قضيت فإنك يا ربنا تقضي بالحق ولا يقضى عليك. اللهم ادخلنا برحمتك في عبادك الصالحين. اللهم اخرجنا من ظلمات الجهل والوهم إلى نور العلم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم اجعلنا ممن يستمعون القول فيتبعون احسنه. اللهم اكفنا بحلالك عن حرامك وبطاعتك عن معصيتك وبفضلك عمن سواك. اللهم بفضلك ورحمتك على كلمة الحق والدين. اللهم انصر الإسلام وعز المسلمين يا أكرم الأكرمين. Oh Allah, spread your mercy upon us, shower us with your blessings, increase our knowledge, grant us forgiveness, and reward us with the company of the prophets in the Firdaus al-A'la. Oh Allah, forgive our parents and all our friends and relatives who have passed away. Oh Allah, make their graves garden from heaven and grant in the Firdaus al-A'la. Oh Allah, we have many of our friends and relatives who are sick. Oh Allah, grant to all of, we have our son Ma'raj, our daughter Aisha Wani. Oh Allah, grant to all of them full and speedy recovery. Oh Allah, guide our children, protect them and make them righteous. Oh Allah, we seek from you all of the good, whether we know it or we don't. And we seek your refuge from all evil, whether we know it or we don't. Oh Allah, we ask you every name you have elected for yourself, that none of us leave this gathering, but his pains have been relieved, his worries have been removed, his debts have been paid, his weaknesses have been concealed, his sins have been forgiven, and his needs have been fulfilled. Subhanallah wa bihamdih, عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. سبحان الله وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. سبحان الله وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خير المرسلين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.